One man, 1,000 women. And this is not a movie, this is the Bible. His name was Solomon, and God himself said Solomon was the smartest person who ever lived. Not just smart, the smartest ever. God actually showed up and said, "Ask me for anything you want. Money, power, fame. Whatever you want, it's yours." You know what Solomon asked for? Wisdom. Just wisdom. And God loved that answer so much, he gave Solomon wisdom and everything else on top of it. So, you're maybe wondering if Solomon was the wisest person who ever lived. How did he end up losing everything? How does the smartest guy in the room make the dumbest mistakes? How do you go from talking to God face to face, to building temples, to fake gods that demanded children be burned alive? That is not a small fall. That is a crash. By the end of this video, you are not going to be thinking about Solomon. You are going to be thinking about yourself. Let's go. Before we can talk about whether God approved or disapproved of any of this, we have to go back and understand the world Solomon was living in. Because if you just read 1,000 Wives through modern eyes and assume you understand what was happening, you're going to miss almost everything. The context here changes the story dramatically, and understanding it is the only way to honestly engage with the harder questions that come after. In the ancient Near East, the world Solomon inhabited roughly 3,000 years ago, there were no international courts, no treaties signed by lawyers in glass offices, no United Nations, no phone calls between heads of state, no international law. None of the structures we use today to maintain peace between nations existed yet. So how did two powerful kingdoms avoid going to war with each other? The answer across virtually every culture in the ancient world was marriage. You gave your daughter to the other king. That was the contract. That was the handshake. That was the binding agreement between nations. And here is why it worked so well. If a smaller king gave his daughter to a greater king, that daughter was now living in the palace. She was behind those walls. She was inside that household. And if the smaller king ever thought about betraying the alliance, he was betraying his own flesh and blood. He was putting his own daughter at risk. For centuries, across Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Hittite Empire, and everywhere in between, royal marriages were not primarily about romance. They were diplomacy. They were political currency. They were how you kept the peace. Now here is where Solomon comes in. Solomon was not just a powerful king. By the time his reign was in full swing, he was the most powerful king in the entire region. Every surrounding nation wanted to be on good terms with Israel. Egypt wanted peace. Moab wanted peace. Ammon, Edom, Sidon, the Hittites, all of them wanted peace with Solomon, and peace cost a daughter. Every single time Solomon sealed a new alliance with a neighboring nation, he received a wife. Every treaty, every trade agreement, every new diplomatic partnership added another woman to the palace. The 1,000 wives were not a love story, they were passports. They were peace treaties walking around in human form, each one representing a nation that was now bound to Israel. To put this in terms you can feel, imagine you are the leader of a small nation, modest resources, surrounded by bigger and more powerful neighbors, and one day, the most powerful country in the world sends someone to your door and says, "We want to be your ally. We will protect you. We will trade with you. We will make sure your enemies leave you alone. All we are asking is that your daughter comes to live in our leader's household as a symbolic bond between our two nations." What do you say? You say yes, every time, without hesitation, because the alternative is no protection, no trade, no allies, just your small nation sitting exposed and vulnerable in an increasingly dangerous world. That was the choice facing every king around Solomon, and they all made the same decision. Now, here is where it gets complicated, because understanding the political reality does not end the conversation. It actually just gets us to the real question. This is the question at the heart of this entire video, and I want to answer it honestly, without giving you a tidy theological bow that lets everyone off the hook. Did God approve of Solomon having 700 wives? Was God okay with this? From the very beginning of the Bible, Genesis chapter 2, the first marriage in human history, God's design was one man and one woman, Adam and Eve, not Adam and 1,000 women, one. And God looked at that arrangement and called it very good. That was the original blueprint, and the rest of the Bible consistently points back to it as the standard. And then centuries later, when God gave Israel its laws through Moses, he included a specific instruction just for kings. It is right there in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 17, and it could not be clearer. The king must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. God wrote this down in the law. He said it plainly. He made it a specific rule for the exact position Solomon held. So, by the time Solomon is collecting wives by the hundreds, this is not ambiguous. The rule existed. Solomon had access to it, and he chose to ignore it. So here's the honest answer. No, God did not approve. God never approved of polygamy. Not with Abraham, not with David, not with Solomon, not with anyone. And this is a distinction the Bible makes repeatedly that we tend to gloss over. There is a massive difference between God approving of something and God allowing something. God gives human beings free will. He lets people make choices he hates. He lets people break rules he clearly wrote down. He tolerates human decisions he disagrees with because he respects the freedom he gave us, and because he is patient in ways that are hard for us to understand. But tolerating something and approving of it are completely different things. When the Bible records what Solomon did with his 1,000 wives, it is not putting a stamp of approval on it. It is recording history. And the Bible makes God's actual verdict on this absolutely, unmistakably clear. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 9, and this is the verse that cuts right through any comfortable interpretation of this story, says, "The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice." God was angry, not gently disappointed, not saddened from a distance, angry. And the reason the text specifically mentions that God had appeared to Solomon twice is because God is making the point that this was not ignorance. Solomon had been personally warned, face to face, by the God of the universe, and he went ahead and did it anyway. That is not a slip-up. That is not an accident. That is a deliberate, sustained walk in the wrong direction. Sustained over years and decades, until Solomon's heart was somewhere his younger self would not have recognized. To really understand what happened, you have to understand who Solomon was before all of this, because the fall only lands with its full weight when you see how high he started. When Solomon first became king, he was young, probably overwhelmed, probably aware that he was following in the footsteps of his father David, a man who was called a man after God's own heart. And one night, God came to Solomon in a dream and said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you, blank check, anything." And Solomon said, "Give me wisdom. Give me a discerning heart so I can govern your people and tell the difference between right and wrong, because who could possibly govern this great people of yours on their own?" And God was so moved by that answer that he told Solomon, "Because you asked for wisdom instead of long life, instead of wealth, instead of the death of your enemies, I will give you a wise and discerning heart, such as no one has ever had before you, and no one will ever have after you. And I will give you what you did not ask for as well, wealth and honor, beyond any king of your generation." This man then went on to build the most magnificent temple in the ancient world as a house for God. He composed over 3,000 proverbs. He wrote over 1,000 songs. Leaders and royalty traveled from across the known world just to sit in the same room as him and hear him speak. The Queen of Sheba, ruler of one of the wealthiest kingdoms of the ancient world, showed up with caravans loaded with gold, spices, and precious stones just for the privilege of testing his wisdom in person. And when she left, she said she had not been told even half of what she witnessed. By every possible measure, Solomon was one of the most extraordinary human beings who ever walked the earth. But Solomon also had ambition. He wanted Israel respected by every nation on earth. He wanted peace and prosperity and a kingdom that would last for generations. Those are not evil goals. Those are actually the goals a good king is supposed to have. And so he started building alliances, and the alliances made sense. And each one strengthened Israel, and each one kept the peace, and each one brought another woman through the palace gates. And somewhere along the way, Solomon probably told himself the same thing most of us tell ourselves when we start down a road we probably shouldn't be on. I can handle this. I know where the line is. I am the wisest man alive. I will not cross it. And then it happened, not all at once, never all at once. It happened the way all the worst things happen, which is 1 degree at a time. His wives brought their gods with them because of course they did. These were women raised in foreign nations with foreign religions, and their faith was part of who they were. And at first, Solomon just let them worship privately. What was the harm? They were just his wives, practicing their own religion quietly in their own corner of the palace. He was not worshiping with them. He was not bowing down to anything foreign. He was just being a tolerant, understanding husband, keeping the peace at home the same way he kept the peace between nations. Then one wife asked for a small altar for her goddess somewhere in the palace, and Solomon said yes to keep the peace. Then another wanted a proper shrine on a nearby hill, and Solomon said yes again. He was probably still telling himself this was just diplomatic hospitality, just maintaining good relations with his allies, just being a reasonable man in a complicated situation. And this is the line in the Bible that should genuinely stop you cold. It says that as Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods. And eventually Solomon himself started going to those shrines. He built a high place for Chemosh, the god of Moab. He built one for Molech, the god of the Ammonites, a god associated with one of the most horrifying rituals in the ancient world, the sacrifice of children in fire. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, the man who asked God for wisdom so he could lead people well, was now building temples to a deity that demanded children be burned alive. How do you get from asking God for wisdom to building altars to child sacrifice? One compromise at a time. One yes when you should have said no. One small step in the wrong direction, then another and another, until one day you look up and realize your heart is somewhere completely unrecognizable from where it started, and you cannot even remember exactly when it happened, because it happened so slowly you never noticed it moving. And God's response came clearly and without softening. He told Solomon, "Because you have done this, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates." And this is where God's mercy shows up inside the judgment. He said, "I will not do it in your lifetime. For the sake of your father David, I will tear it out of the hand of your son." Think about what that actually meant for Solomon. He would live out the rest of his days as king, but he would do so knowing that everything he had built, the temple, the alliances, the golden age of Israel, was going to collapse the moment he was gone. He carried that knowledge with him every single day until he died. That is not consequence-free mercy. That is mercy that still leaves a wound, and it unfolded exactly as God promised. Solomon died after 40 years as king, and his son Rehoboam took the throne, and within months, not years, months, 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel revolted. They walked away from Rehoboam's leadership and formed their own separate kingdom. The great unified nation that David had built and Solomon had expanded was gone, split permanently in two, never to be reunited. The northern kingdom of Israel was eventually destroyed by the Assyrians. The southern kingdom of Judah was eventually conquered by Babylon and the people taken into exile. A chain of catastrophes that traced all the way back to one man making one small compromise at a time, until he had accumulated 1,000 of them. Here's where I want to slow down, because I think this is the moment most people check out of the Solomon story. They hear all of that, they say, "Wow, what a cautionary tale. Glad I would never do anything like that," and they move on. But I want to push back on that reaction, and I want to push back on it hard. You do not need 1,000 wives to drift from God. You do not need to build altars to foreign gods on a hillside outside Jerusalem. The mechanism that destroyed Solomon, the slow, quiet, 1 degree at a time drift, is not an ancient problem. It is the most common spiritual problem in the world today, and it is most dangerous precisely when you think you are too wise or too experienced or too committed to be vulnerable to it. Here is what makes this story so uncomfortable. Solomon was not foolish. He was the smartest man who ever lived. He had been visited by God personally. He literally wrote proverbs about the exact destruction he ended up bringing on himself. And he still drifted. That is the point. Knowledge does not protect you from drift. Spiritual gifts do not protect you from drift. Years of faithfulness do not protect you from drift, because drift never looks like a dramatic decision to abandon everything you believe. It looks like small, reasonable compromises, each one feeling manageable, all adding up to a destination you never would have chosen if you could have seen it from the beginning. And here is the grace inside the warning. God's anger with Solomon did not mean God walked away. The consequences were real. They lasted centuries. But God's faithfulness outlasted Solomon's failure. Sin echoes far beyond your own lifetime, and God does not abandon the people he loves just because they walk away from him. So let the real question land. What are the small compromises in your life right now moving you the wrong direction, 1 degree at a time? What are you telling yourself you can handle because you are wise enough, faithful enough, experienced enough? Solomon told himself the same things. If the wisest man who ever lived could end up somewhere his younger self would not recognize, none of us are too gifted or too close to God to be immune to the same pull. But here is what I keep thinking about. What happens when it is not the wisest man, but the strongest? Samson tore a lion apart with his bare hands. He defeated an entire army by himself. His enemies were terrified just knowing he existed, and yet he fell into the exact same trap, a relationship that slowly, quietly drained everything out of him 1 day at a time. Same enemy, same mechanism, just faster, louder, and with an ending that will completely change how you read the whole story. Click the video on screen right now. Samson is next, like always. Thanks for watching. These videos take me a long time to make, so please consider subscribing. See you in the next one.